lived within blocks of each other, but others were probing American military bases, FBI and DEA offices, and officials' homes. So we need to know, what was Mossad doing in America on and around 9/11? In fact, so many Israelis were deported, the French paper of record called Le Monde published an article on March 6 of 2002 whose headline read, "Vast Israeli Spy Network Dismantled in the U.S." Critical thinking is really important at moments like this. Millions of people had concluded by noon on 9/11 that the Israelis were behind these attacks, but those conclusions were based on prejudice, not on evidence available so soon. One must be very careful of that. Millions of other people concluded just as quickly that Arabs were behind the attack on 9/11, and they were ready to condemn all Muslims that day. Well, that kind of knee-jerk reaction can get you into global wars that are very painful and expensive. One should know for sure before making dangerous accusations. So let's examine what little actual evidence exists in the public domain on the issue of what Mossad was up to then. First, 5 Israelis were undoubtedly arrested on 9/11 in a white van marked Urban Moving Systems because they'd been seen videotaping and celebrating the fires and collapse of Towers 1 and 2 so enthusiastically from the Jersey side of the river that citizens called the FBI. I first read about that in this New York Times of Friday, September 14th, 2001. That's evidence. But what these 5 men were doing remains locked in classified documents. A former German minister of technology named Andreas von Bülow claims that the FBI deported all 5 2 months later, having concluded that at least 2 were active Mossad agents on a mission. Von Bülow was a member of the German parliament for 25 years, and he was the Bundestag's liaison to military intelligence. So right or wrong, he's not an amateur. This claim was confirmed by ABC News on September 21st of 2002 and by others like the New York Jewish newspaper Forward. Another thread of evidence first reported in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz is a claim that employees of an Israeli tech firm called Odigo got warning messages in New York City 2 hours before the first aircraft crashed into Tower Number 1. This implies foreknowledge of the attack. Foreknowledge is significant, and there are other indications of foreknowledge by people like Pentagon generals who were warned not to fly on 9/11, according to Newsweek anyway. Another thread of evidence claims at least 140 Israeli nationals were arrested or cited in investigations before 9/11 and about 60 after 9/11, many named in a classified Drug Enforcement Agency report that alleged they'd been spying on DEA offices and U.S. military bases. Some of that evidence was presented in a 20-minute, 4-part Fox News series by Carl Cameron that aired from December 11 to December 14, 2001. Fox removed that story from their website 2 days after showing the last segment.
Since September 11th, more than 60 Israelis have been arrested or detained, either under the new Patriot anti-terrorism law or for immigration violations. A handful of active Israeli military were among those detained, according to investigators, who say some of the detainees also failed polygraph questions when asked about alleged surveillance activities against and in the United States. There is no indication that the Israelis were involved in the 9/11 attacks, but investigators suspect that the Israelis may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance and not shared it. A highly placed investigator said there are, quote, tie-ins, but when asked for details, he flatly refused to describe them, saying, quote, evidence linking these Israelis to 9/11 is classified. I cannot tell you about evidence that has been gathered. It's classified information. Fox News has learned that one group of Israelis, spotted in North Carolina recently, is suspected of keeping an apartment in California to spy on a group of Arabs who the United States is also investigating for links to terrorism. Numerous classified documents obtained by Fox News indicate that even prior to September 11th, as many as 140 other Israelis had been detained or arrested in a secretive and sprawling investigation into suspected espionage by Israelis in the United States. Investigators from numerous government agencies are part of a working group that's been compiling evidence since the mid-90s. These documents detail hundreds of incidents in cities and towns across the country that investigators say, quote, may well be an organized intelligence gathering activity. The first part of the investigation focuses on Israelis who say they are art students from the University of Jerusalem and Bezalel Academy. They repeatedly made contact with U.S. government personnel, the report says, by saying they wanted to sell cheap art or handiwork. Documents say they, quote, targeted and penetrated military bases, the DEA, FBI, and dozens of other government facilities, and even secret offices and unlisted private homes of law enforcement and intelligence personnel. The majority of those questioned, quote, stated they served in military intelligence, electronic surveillance intercept, and or explosive ordnance units.
Several of the alleged Israeli agents apparently lived in South Florida, very near the rental homes of several of the alleged 9/11 hijackers, including ringleader Mohammed Atta. Other sources say that Mossad warned our administration that a big attack was close, but was ignored. Russia, Germany, France, Italy, India, Egypt, even the Cayman Islands warned America that an attack was being planned. You may recall the President's daily brief of August 6, 2001, that warned, Bin Laden determined to strike in America. This document cited several foreign intelligence agencies, but all were apparently ignored. So the big question is not, was Mossad here? Mossad was certainly here, and lots of them. The question is, why? What were they doing? Now, I don't think Mossad planned this, but I don't have evidence I need for a formal opinion on that critical question. Since Congress decided not to do a real investigation when the evidence trails were hot, we need something like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission now to sort this all out safely. We need one now, not tomorrow, because whoever did do 9/11 intends to start more wars. False flag operations are difficult for people to deal with psychologically. It's hard to cope when leaders attack their own people. As in child abuse, the victims tend to rationalize. One of the most appropriate questions is how could secret services that include Muslims from two countries, Israeli Jews, and American Christians work together to undercut the welfare of their own peoples? On the face of it, this seems like a ridiculous idea. But it is a certain fact that intelligence agencies collaborate with each other every day and sometimes in remarkable ways. The Iran-Contra operation in the mid-1980s provides an example. Enemies worked together then to fight a common foe called communism. One motive for similar collusion today could be that factions in all of these countries fear radical Islamic fundamentalism. The essence of the Iran-Contra story is that a deal was struck between dark parts of the secret services of America, Israel, and Iran in 1982 to support a deposed Nicaraguan dictator, Anastasio Somoza. High-tech American weapons were sold to our enemy, Iran, by their enemy, Israel, to raise unaccountable money to support a secret army called the Contras, who were waging war against the government of Nicaragua. Hence the label Iran-Contra Affair. One of the best books on this is Prophets of War by Ari Ben-Menashe. He was the Mossad officer who transferred American weapons to Iran and brought the money back. It helps to know who got what, because that shows how secret deals work in the very dark world of covert operations. First, the Contras got lots of money to feed, fuel, and arm their army. Second, the Israelis got some money for serving as middlemen, but more important was by providing advanced weapons to Iran, they prolonged an 8-year war it was waging with Iraq at that time, thus bleeding their treasuries and young. Iran got weapons it desperately needed, and the Reagan administration got a way to finance their secret war in Nicaragua that had been specifically forbidden by the U.S. Congress. The Iran-Contra operation ran from 1982 to 1985, when it was expanded